Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. Thank you for joining. We're glad you're here. I can't actually see how many people are here. Maybe people are just jumping on and populating. So go ahead and put your name and your location and any kind of hello you want to put in the chat so people can see who you are. We're here today really because of our love of leader development, our investment in it over many years, our experience, our data, and our commitment to the development of leaders as the key to business success. I'm Lori Mazan. I'm the president and the chief coaching officer at Sounding Board. I've been coaching Fortune 100 leaders, biotech, tech leaders for about 25 years. We started Sounding Board to bring the amazing development of executive style coaching to all leaders in an organization, whether they're formal or informal leaders, really with the goal of accelerating leader development earlier in people's career and creating the world's most impactful leaders. Last year, we released our coaching management system to help corporate customers, deliver, manage, measure, and scale their coaching. I don't know, I can't talk today for some reason. Their coaching initiatives, because how can companies deeply utilize coaching without technology? If you're talking like a global deployment, you have to have technology to manage that. And this year we're adding mentoring and on-demand coaching capabilities to our software tools so that we can provide an integrated platform for developing leaders in a dynamic human-centered approach. Really honored to have the irresistible Josh Bersin here today and his colleague Nehal Nangia as well. Josh is a leading voice in the talent strategy industry, which I'm sure you all know and why you're here. I don't think you're here for me. I think you're here for him. And we really like his focus on human-centered leadership and the changing role of leaders in organizations. We also appreciate that he knows the value of technology for HR and that really makes a difference in the impact and success. Plus, he's really fun to have a conversation with, and he's not opinionated at all. Nehal is the director of research at the Josh Bersin Company. She's got 15 years in talent management, and she's with the brains behind the research that we'll present today. And she's a certified coach herself. Recently, Sounding Board and the Josh Bersin Companies have written a research paper, a white paper on the future of coaching as a key leadership development tool. And that's what we're here to talk about today. So they're going to throw up the agenda. There it is. And you can see the topics. And we'll have about a 30-40 minute presentation. And then quite a bit of time for questions and answers. And we'll ask you to post your questions in the chat, and we'll do our best to respond to those questions. So here we go. Josh, take it away.
Thank you, Lori. And welcome, everyone. I'm going to do a little intro here, and then Nehal's going to share the research with you. And let me give you a little bit of context. And I know because there's almost 300 of you that there's a lot of interest in this topic. I first started studying leader. Well, I was led by other people for 20 years before I became an analyst and started studying leadership in the early 2000s. And what I discovered, which you all know very well, is there must be 25,000 books on the topic, 25,000 different opinions, and lots of experiences that people have had on what good leadership or sound leadership or strategic leadership means. And right now, we are in a bit of a crisis in this area for a whole bunch of reasons. Number one, we had the last 3 years of human-centered leadership where virtually every manager, supervisor, or leader had to become empathetic and flexible and more human-centered. And our research shows the difference between human-centered leadership and business-centered leadership. But now we have this weird economic time where the economy is slowing. There's a lot of inflation. Employees are actually sort of disengaged again. Most of the research that I just read this morning shows that most employees are beginning to wonder why they're working as hard as they are, because their salaries are not necessarily keeping up with inflation. In the tech industry, there have been a lot of layoffs. There are layoffs in other industries. And CEOs have said explicitly that they don't think employees are productive enough. So it's actually a very challenging time to be in leadership development, because you have to decide how much are we going to push towards empathetic leadership and growth and care and flexibility, and how much are we going to push towards accountability, results, profitability, productivity, up or out. Now, one more comment on that, and then I'll turn it over to Nehal. When we first started doing this research a long time ago, it was in the early 2000s. Basically, what everybody said to me is, I want to copy what GE is doing. I want the Jack Welch style Crotonville of leadership. And there must have been 10 books written on what's wrong with GE in the last 2 years. No one is copying GE at the moment. So we need something new. So I'm not going to say I know what that is, but we're working on that. In fact, Nehal is in the middle of figuring that out. So this is a very challenging and important time, especially for one more reason, and that is that the demographics of the global workforce have changed. The people my age are retiring. The number of workers is flat. In most countries, it's actually declining. So we have to train younger people earlier in their careers to take on leadership roles. And since the pyramid is inverted, a lot of the people my age are going to be working for people, 20 years younger. So lots and lots of opportunities and demand here. And what Lori and her partner and company has done is really, really strategic and really, really valuable. So I hope you check out Sounding Board as well. Okay, Nehal, let me turn it over to you and tell everybody about what we've been discovering here.
Well, let's do that. Bear with me for a second. Let me bring up my screen. And I suppose you'll be able to see my screen, but give me a minute. We should be able to see my slides now.
Looks good.
Fantastic. Let's get started. Thank you again, Josh. And hello, everyone. I see some familiar names, some good old friends. So hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Nehal. I lead learning and leadership research here at the Josh Bersin Company, and we've got a lot to talk about. So taking my cue from a lot of what Josh said, we're at a time when leadership has never been more important. We're in the middle of high turnover rates, labor shortages, and the need to sustain business growth in a seemingly tightening economy. Amid all of this, organizations lean on leaders and recognize the need to build more leaders at every level in the organization. Traditional models and approaches don't make the cut, and we'll talk about why that is and what organizations can do differently to build better leaders effectively and at scale. But to get us started, I'll begin with the macro context of where we are and why leadership and the topic of leadership development is so important today. This is where we are at right now. The economic growth that picked up in 2008 was interrupted by the pandemic, causing the supply chain problem we have with skills and development and job redesign going on through the current cycle. Overall, we've had a growth cycle that lasted us good 15 years, and now we're sort of at a late stage economic growth where the economy is still growing in many countries, but it is slower economic growth. Job creation is also slowing down. We're still creating new jobs, but just not as many as we were last year. There's over 160 million people working in the United States, and there's over 10 million jobs open today. 1 out of 15 jobs roughly are empty today, which means people are moving between roles and jobs at a rate that we've never seen before. This slide only shows US labor data, but this is true globally, where choices and open jobs are way too many and hiring people is still harder than ever. And what this means is we're likely to have a slowing economy and still a very difficult labor market. Quit rates continue to be high and unemployment rates continue to be as low as 3.5% in the US. Over 4 million people are quitting their jobs every year, which is more than a third of the workforce. There just aren't enough people outside to fill those jobs. What that means is organizations need to engage, nurture, and build that talent internally. You need to help your people build new skills and grow in new ways. You need leaders who will help people grow. You need to facilitate growth in new roles, and you need to grow more people into leadership roles. But first and most importantly, you need to hold on to your people. You need to hold on to your talent and keep them from quitting your organization. We wanted to understand what keeps people from quitting. What is it that has the highest impact on driving engagement and retention and creating an employee experience that will make people stay? So we did an enormous study on employee experience. We studied close to 100 practices that impact employee experience. And here's what we saw. These are the top 15 most impactful practices. And if you look closely, you'll see those yellow icons dominating all over this chart, which are all practices related to trust in the organization. 10 out of the 15 most impactful employee experience practices have to do with trust in the organization, transparency, empathy, integrity, and a positive and inclusive work environment. Bottom line is, people today need to trust the organization. In fact, if you're familiar with Edelman's Trust Index, people today trust businesses more than they trust the government. And this context is extremely important for our webinar today, because in every organization, it's leaders that are the vehicle for building trust in the organization, especially in a volatile business environment today, making the topic of leadership more important than ever before. And what all of this implies is that today, more than ever before, you need to support leaders and teach them how to be more empathetic, more sensitive, and more inclusive. You need to teach your leaders to be sort of better psychologists as part of the leadership manifesto. And you need to teach your leaders how to care, because 2/3 of people today quit at the drop of a hat, even without another job in hand. And believe it or not, the number one reason why people leave is having leaders who don't care. This quote on my screen actually resonates so much with everything we're talking about. It says, in the industrial era, jobs were about muscles, how strong you are. Then with the internet and digitalization came the era of how smart you are, being a knower and being right. But in the future, jobs will be about the heart, how much you care. And this is absolutely true for leadership today and in the future. Building on this idea of trust and care and empathy is this notion of human-centered leadership. Now, you might wonder that there is no such thing as leading without thinking about humans. But every single leadership situation, decision, meeting, and every behavior that a leader exhibits at work can be thought of in two parts. There's the business part. What is the decision or action that we need to take to improve the performance of the company or team or product, whatever that is? And then there's the human side. What can we do or should we do to make the team more effective, to make the individual more effective, to help them learn, to give them an environment where they can innovate and grow? And what we've learned, especially from the pandemic, is that during good times, you can focus on the left. But during uncertain and stressful times, during times of transformation and change, you have to focus on the right. It is the companies who focus on their people first that are companies that survive and thrive through transformation and disruption. Human-centered leadership is essentially a mindset. It is an intention. And the skills that are behind it and how leaders need to act and behave are what we call the power skills of leaders. Now, in the old days, if you looked at leadership models, they would typically talk about things like customer centricity, innovation, execution, accountability, teamwork. They're all important, but they don't necessarily create behaviors. They tell you what you need to do, but are less about how you act and behave. The leadership capabilities that matter today are what we call power skills. And to give you some context on where these come from, there's a group at UC Berkeley called the Greater Good Science Center, and this particular group studies happiness. And they've defined characteristics or words that create happiness, which are some of the words you'll see on my slide. These are the power skills that we need to assess and develop in our current and future leaders. These skills are what matter the most. But yes, they're not enough. Without the foundation of the right functional skills or business acumen, leaders cannot drive impact. Functional skills are foundational. And power skills are what differentiate talent, business, and innovation outcomes for an organization. So we see that the capabilities that leaders need today have evolved, but also the definition of who is a leader, that too has evolved. For the longest time, and this started about 25 years ago, when we'd mentioned the word leaders, it was understood that it was referring to the top of the pyramid. Organizations would think of leadership development as the 9-box succession process, and then the curated, highly expensive, rarefied processes and programs to develop senior executives. But that's different today. Most of the traditional thinking around leadership comes from Ram Charan and his iconic book, The Leadership Pipeline. Essentially, the leadership pipeline model posited that leaders go through these 6 stages. You lead individuals, you lead teams, you lead a function, you lead a business, you lead a business group, and then you lead an enterprise. And as you move up in these levels of responsibility, you move from supervision, which happens at first-line leadership, where a lot of what you're doing is supervising a team, to business leadership, where you're making big decisions about the company and where money will be spent and what will get done and what will not get done. This architecture of leadership is based on linear hierarchical org structures, which is not how businesses operate today. How businesses do operate today and what that looks like is what you see on my screen. The numerous interconnected illuminated patterns that you see on the right side of my slide, that is a very close visualization of how organizations operate today. Those sticks and boxes and org charts that we've all used and seen, and they hold good on paper, but almost 80% of organizations today operate as smaller, flatter, highly interconnected and empowered networks of teams. And in teams, people lead each other. They collaborate, they make decisions, they improve each other's performance, influence each other, and they get work done, which makes everyone a leader in their own capacity and contribution. Traditional models assume that growth takes the path of leadership or management. But today, many employees voluntarily don't want to choose the leadership or management path, but they still want to grow. For example, many engineers, production specialists, operations people, sales executives, they may never want to get into management. Yet, they're all very important people for the business, and they have an impact on how their peers and teams perform, which is what necessitates that we expand the scope of leadership development beyond just positional leaders. Leadership today is a capability that permeates throughout the organization. It's a muscle that every individual in an organization needs to build, not just positional leaders. And a lot of forward-thinking organizations are embracing this shift in the definition of leadership. FICO, for example, is a leading applied analytics company. They define leaders as anyone who inspires excellence, and they invest in building leaders at all levels in the organization. For Novartis, leaders are not bosses, but people who listen more and talk less, who help build an inspired and curious organization. It's people who support the team, not people who have a team to support them. And Novartis wants to build an entire unbossed organization. And another great example is of Lego, the building blocks company. They define leadership as the act of creating a safe space, like a playground where everybody feels energized every day, making leadership a capability for everyone in the organization, not just leaders. And this is a significant mindset shift for HR and L&D teams, not just in how you develop leaders, but also who you develop as leaders. The big question is, how do we develop these new capabilities at scale across the organization? And as it turns out, most organizations have not figured that out yet. When we asked over 8,000 HR professionals through our global capability assessment project, only 11% said they have the capabilities needed for what it takes to build the right leadership models and to articulate the skills that really matter. Less than a third of these 8,000 HR professionals said they have the capabilities to develop leaders effectively. And only about 21% of organizations believe that they offer leadership development programs that are world-class and that deliver the results and outcomes they strive for. Now, if you want to drive outcomes through leadership development programs, what's most important to know is that it cannot be a one and done. You need to think of leadership development as an end-to-end continuum and make the shift from episodic to continuous experiential journeys. You need to provide ongoing help through coaching, tailored development, and lots of external and internal exposure. Sorry. The leadership curriculum today is about as diverse and blended as anything could possibly be in training. And as organizations decide what and how to mix and match, what we endorse and recommend as a holistic approach to leadership development are the 6 E's. The first E is envision. You need to start with a clear vision. What does good leadership look like in your organization? Leadership models are unique to every organization, and they must mirror the culture, mission, and values that you stand for. Then the education piece comes in, where you need to put in place formal trainings and programs to ensure all leaders know how to get things done as well as how to lead people. So for getting things done, you need to train them on products, programs, processes, policies. And to lead people, they need coaching on performance management, goal setting, how to give meaningful feedback, and how to mitigate biases. But just education isn't enough, because studies tell us that in barely over a period of 24 hours, people forget 70% of what they learn. So you need to cement learnings from the formalized trainings and education through experiences that will help them apply those learnings in the flow of work. You need to think about job rotations, developmental assignments, stretch assignments, and international jobs. Well, some people are born leaders, but most people learn it over time through experiences and by doing it. The next piece is exposure. The best lessons in leadership come from observing, talking with, and getting feedback from others. Organizations need to create access to coaches and mentors and exposure to outside companies and senior executives. Vendors like Sounding Board allow you to have access to a huge network of highly experienced coaches in an affordable and scalable way, making this kind of tailored exposure an opportunity for everyone in the organization, not just a rarefied experience reserved for top of the REM executives. And then another important piece is evaluation. This is particularly tricky because, especially if you're not a good leader, people will rarely ever have the courage to tell you that you're not a good leader. So we need feedback tools to keep us honest. Often we need some forms of psychological or other forms of assessments to see where we have blind spots. Coaches can help leaders self-reflect and understand where they have rough edges and help them be better leaders. Now, the final piece. Once you've created a common language and understanding around what good leadership means for your organization, and you've given your leaders the development they need to build those skills, what next? You need to empower your leaders with the tools, insights, resources they need to be effective. If we need leaders who will empathize and care for our workforce, we need to start with caring for our leaders and ensuring that we're creating capacity rather than adding to workloads. We need to empower and equip our leaders with tools that will provide them with insights in an easy and consumable way. So think about team health dashboards, action platforms, and productivity tools. Ultimately, traditional leadership development, which followed a stepwise architected process, does not work anymore. You need to build leaders at every level. You need to offer the right mix of education, experiences, exposure, and evaluation mechanisms to develop and equip leaders for success. And to do that, it is also important to understand what kinds of experiences can comprise the right mix. You must develop a very clear understanding of the wide range of offerings that you can consider for different audiences, variety of leadership development experiences that organizations can facilitate, and we'll look at those side by side in just a minute. First is
I think we're losing Nehal.
Is personalized coaching, which is typically offered to executives, but that's are we? Can you still
Why don't
hear
you
me?
turn your camera off just in case, Nehal, because the internet's a little bit wonky. It might help. Just to keep talking. It might help the bandwidth.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Is
Can
it
hear you
better?
great. Yep.
Thank you, Josh. I hope I didn't get cut off, and sorry about that. Where we are at right now is we're talking about a wide variety of facilitated leadership development experiences that organizations can choose from. The first is personalized coaching, which is typically offered to executives, but that is changing now. More and more organizations today are recognizing the need and value of coaching, and the demand for coaching has been increasing. The HR tech market is responding, and the coaching industry is exploding with vendors who can facilitate pairings with coaches at very competitive price points. Coaches are professionals who are trained to help individuals find their own solution rather than offering their own advice or opinions. They often use inquiry-based techniques to help their client find the right answers, and they work with them to accomplish short-term defined goals. And we saw in our research that high-performing companies are 5 times more likely to invest in coaching, and they are 18 times more likely to invest in coaching for developing leaders at all levels. Group coaching, as you can tell, is coaching for groups, not personalized coaching. Group coaching takes the coaching model and infuses it with principles of collaborative learning. Conagra Brands, for example, offers a year-long cohort-based program in partnership with Sounding Board, which includes a 6-month group coaching engagement. Group coaching sessions are integrated within leadership programs and allow people to reap the benefits of coaching in carefully composed small groups where people can interact, discuss, and challenge each other and practice what they've learned with the years. Piggybacking on a very similar model, group trainings are programs delivered by expert facilitators and are based on content that is researched, tried and tested across thousands of learners, and delivered in a collaborative small group and digital environment. Group trainings for leadership development typically focus on essential management skills like communicating effectively, managing difficult conversations, and managing biases. The biggest difference between group coaching and group trainings being that group trainings are facilitated by expert trainers, not certified coaches.
Can I
Next is mentoring. Of course, Josh.
You're breaking up a lot. Why don't we speed up a little bit? We may have to finish up your piece because it's getting harder to hear you. So unfortunately, the internet is just flaky.
Yeah. Give me 1 second. Let me pause sharing my screen and let me see if I can switch to a different internet, and if that helps, just bear with me for 1 second, please.
Everybody wants to hear every word you're saying, and we're missing a few words here and there.
I am so sorry about that. Let's see. I switched to a different connection.
Okay, it sounds good now. Yep, keep going.
Okay, perfect. So where was I? We had just started.
Mentoring. I think you were talking about mentoring.
Let's do that. And I'm being very, very brave by coming back on camera, but if it breaks up again, please let me know and I'll go off camera. Perfect. So mentoring, speeding it up. Mentors are not coaches. Mentors are people like you and me who provide experience-based learnings and unique perspectives to help people navigate long-term career aspirations. I've seen that a lot of organizations as well as vendors tend to use coaching and mentoring interchangeably, but they're very different. Coaches do this as a profession and they're professionally trained and certified to do so, but mentors do this as a passion, as a way of giving back or paying it forward. And several leadership vendors can now facilitate pairings with internal and external mentors. And finally, the metaverse, AR, VR, and simulation-based platforms are radically redefining leadership development. They help leaders develop difficult interpersonal skills by practicing staged scenarios with human-powered avatars. Each of these offerings bring a unique value proposition and serve different strategic needs. You need to curate the right combination of experiences for your people, and the leadership development tech market is here to help. It is flooded with tools, platforms, and content providers that can help you deliver these experiences without causing a massive strain on either your budgets or on your L&D team resources. The coaching tech market is particularly flourishing right now, and in fact, our research validates that coaching, when used regularly and widely, is the most impactful leadership development practice. And I'll add a little bit of personal perspective here as well, because it does make sense. I've attended many different leadership programs throughout my career at different companies. but nothing comes close to the experience of having a personal coach. It really does help to have an external, unbiased advocate who will help you navigate, think differently, tell you the way things are, and help you find your way. Having a coach is sort of like having a therapist at work who is part of your personal growth journey, who understands your unique challenges and situations, and is a confidant who won't get you in trouble for being fully honest and transparent. That is what coaching is all about, and it can be a life-altering developmental experience, both personally and professionally. Coaching is personalized and development focused, making it even more important and impactful in times when every employee is dealing with unprecedented change personally and professionally, especially with what we saw through the pandemic. Coaching platforms help companies find the right coaches for their culture, growth phase, industry, or even region. They also offer tools that monitor engagement to help the coach and participant to identify key issues and make the sessions more effective. These platforms are a proven high-value investment for leadership development. In fact, organizations that offer coaching for leadership development have 20% lower turnover, 46% higher leadership quality, and fill roles 23% more quickly. Group coaching is also a rapidly increasing market. In addition to the benefits of coaching and collaborative learning, these platforms are also optimized to alleviate the administrative burden of L&D departments to schedule, track, follow up.
Okay, are you on another slide? You're on the 5 levels of leadership development experiences. I'm just curious, maybe the slides are behind. There we go.
Thank you, Josh. I had paused sharing and I never realized that the slides weren't advancing, so sorry about that. Cool, but we didn't miss much.
No, everybody's paying attention. You're getting really rave reviews. Keep going.
Thank you, Josh. All right, so although I feel compelled to do that, so we didn't miss much. We were at those experiences. We're talking about coaching now, the value prop of coaching, individual coaching, and we were at group coaching. So I was talking about group coaching and the benefits of group coaching as well. So most group coaching and cohort-based training vendors have pre and post assessments and very sophisticated measurement instruments. They typically work with companies to determine a cool-off period, after which they measure the impact, behavior change, and retention from learning, allowing HR professionals to not only drive impact, but also measure and substantiate the impact of their investments. And what we also saw in our research is that, in a sense, HR professionals are the biggest champions of coaching. In our global capability project, we asked 8,000 HR professionals, and I'm sure I've said the number 8,000 a lot of times by now. We asked them to indicate the development opportunities they consider most important for career growth, and coaching and mentoring were number 1 on their list. What this tells us is we no longer need to sell the business case or the value proposition of coaching and development. HR knows it. And that's not surprising, because HR professionals often have backgrounds in psychology, education, or sociology, and they understand and believe in the power of one-to-one human connection. Their deep understanding of the value of one-on-one coaching for individuals, leaders, and themselves is core to their perspective. They recognize the value of coaching to help individuals perform better, while maximizing talent outcomes like development, engagement, retention, and the holistic employee experience. So HR knows it, and our research validates it. Investments in coaching are not just a lever for leadership development. They have an outsized impact on critical talent, business, and innovation outcomes, including career growth, change adaptability, and customer satisfaction. Organizations that strategically invest in coaching to develop leaders are 6 times more likely to enable career growth, 3 times more likely to adapt well to change. They're thrice as likely to engage and retain their workforce and make them feel valued. And they're also twice as likely to delight customers. It is a great time for L&D departments to take advantage of this hyper-growing leadership development technology market and strategically invest in vendors to provide the right mix of one-on-one coaching, group coaching, live trainings, mentoring, and several other high-value leadership experiences. These solutions can help and support organizations to democratize and personalize leadership development across all career levels. Before I wrap up, I'll talk a little bit about a couple of organizations we spoke with as part of our research, one of them being Intel, which is a gold standard example. Intel overhauled its cultural values in 2018-19, and the leads of Intel's culture and strategy teams decided to lean on coaching as the means to foster adoption of the new corporate culture and values. They have an internal coaching function, which is funded by the heads of culture and strategy teams at Intel. The function helps people get coached and also teaches them how to coach. They have over 200 internal professionally certified leadership coaches. Intel funds their coaching certifications. These internal coaches or employees who are certified coaches, when they volunteer their time to coaching and developing teams, in addition to their day jobs, they are rewarded with development money of up to $2,000 per person, which they can then use for additional certifications or external programs to further develop themselves. Intel also uses external coaches. So they use external coaches for executives or to augment the overflow of coaching needs beyond what internal coaches can support. Sounding Board provides them a coaching management system that integrates internal and external coaches into one centralized global offering. Intel is a fantastic case in point on using coaching to build leadership capabilities, foster company culture and values, and incentivize managers to be coaches and support the development of their teams. Another great example is Conagra. They offer a multitude of leadership development experiences through coaching, mentoring, and tools and assessments to help build critical capabilities that make an employee successful at Conagra. They offer personalized coaching to executives as well as diverse talent. Employees have access to 360-degree and self-assessments. These assessments provide insights into where people have capability gaps. And upon completing the assessment, employees get access to a one-on-one debrief with a sounding board coach to help address those gaps. Conagra, to this date, has put over 500 people through programs or experiences that include a coaching component. 50 people have gone through the personalized coaching program for underrepresented talent. These programs are very highly rated, and 16% of participants have received promotions or career growth shortly after completing the program, which is one of the most credible measures of success of any development program. With that, let's bring it home with a quick recap of where we started on the topic of leadership itself and how leadership has evolved from positional leadership to leadership based on connections and contributions that individuals make. The shift from leadership as a capability just for people managers or executives to a capability that permeates across every career level and role, irrespective of whether you have people management responsibilities. Leadership today is not limited to business knowledge. Instead, leans heavily on people knowledge, where leaders truly believe that taking care of your people comes first, and only then will people take care of the business and make it thrive. Leadership today is a reflection of how businesses operate, shifting from command and control to inspiring excellence, empowering teams, and unleashing performance. It is these human skills or power skills that differentiate outcomes, and leveraging coaching and cohort-based leadership development solutions are one way of strategically building these skills through experiences, exposure, and access to leadership experts in a scalable, effective, and engaging way. One final second for a super quick plug. We've just kicked off our biggest ever study on irresistible leadership, as Josh mentioned. What we're trying to unpack is what most organizations are struggling with today, which is how do you operationalize leadership behaviors and leadership models, and how do you create accountability for these behaviors? So join us. I'll drop the survey link in the chat, and by participating, you will also get early access to our research insights later this year. Thank you. And now I will turn it back to Lori and Josh.
Oh, you got a lot of fans out there. A lot of people really enjoyed that. And so I apologize for interrupting you.
No,
and
thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, so much good information. Everyone's asking for the slides.
Yeah.
So we're heading into the Q&A period now. I see quite a few questions in the Q&A tab there, and as well as a lot in the chat. So Josh, do you want to pick out a couple that you want to start with?
Yeah, let me start with just, there's about 5 themes going on at the same time. One is the Leadership Pipeline book. There was a little bit of a debate about that book. And then there was an interesting question that seems to have disappeared. I answered about flattening organizations. The thing that's changed, from, I'm only one person. A lot of you guys know more about this than I do, but, the thing that's changed in the last 25 years is companies don't operate as hierarchies the way they did. The older models of leadership, many of which I looked at and met many companies, were really this gated model where you waited your turn and then you went through the 9-box grid. And when you were eventually ready, you were put into leadership role. And there was this idea of, you're not ready for this yet, so we're not going to give you this job.
Yep.
Well,
and you had to pay your dues, right?
yeah, and you had to pay. Nowadays, it's almost the opposite. Like, let's give you this job and you can learn how to do it by doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well,
by the way,
one reason, Josh, was because in the past you had such a long number of years for that development to happen, because
right.
the employee was staying at the organization 20 years or 30 years or something. And now the average length is something like 3.5.
Exactly. And the other thing that's changed, of course, is the dynamics of the company are changing constantly. There's a new business unit, a new organization, new go-to-market strategy. So we always need people to run these new things that keep coming up. And we can't wait for somebody to sort of plod their way through the organization until we give them these new jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So we're, and this goes for everybody at all ages. People in their 20s and their 30s are being given leadership opportunities all the time. So if you don't have a development program of some kind, they're going to just guess. They're just going to learn on the job. And there were many comments about coaching, which I could not agree more. Everybody needs a coach. Lori, I'm sure you can tell that story better than I can. And now that we have platforms like Sounding Board and we can democratize this, you have that as a tool that you didn't have before. It was way too expensive before this.
Yeah. Yeah, and you mentioned GE, and they used to have this program, which was like manager simulation program. Like once they had it, everybody had it. I taught that a zillion times back in the day. And I kind of feel like coaching is the leader acceleration program. Like with coaching, a leader can develop fairly dramatically in a much shorter period of time than the traditional methodologies allowed.
How do you, Lori, there's a question for you. It's on my mind. I didn't see anybody else ask it, but I'll ask it anyway. How do you match a coach to a leader? What's the
Oh, that's a
trick?
great question. So very interesting, because Sounding Board, we have a unique matching algorithm, and we do it differently than most people. So the standard is matching the person being coached to someone in their own field or someone with their experience. And we consider that more in the mentoring range. For coaching, we use a survey that shows both parties' interaction style. And we use that to match the coach, and we call them the coachee, the client, the employee, whatever you want to call them, participant. And because we match the way those two people operate, our success in matching is way into the 90s. And what we do is use a standard deviation. So we don't want the coach and the coachee to think exactly alike, because now they don't get any development in their thinking. And we don't want their approach and thinking to be so diverse, there's no meeting of the minds. So we have that standard deviation, and we get feedback constantly. Like, how did you match me with this coach? They're so perfect. Yeah, they're perfect for me. So it's more like a human interaction approach than, as you're saying, a business or functional approach.
Great. I think that's one of the secret sauce.
Yeah. I always said it, if we wanted to do something different, we should open a dating site, because our interpersonal matching rate's so good. Yeah.
Right. What else we've got here? Well, there's quite a few questions from people confused about the complexity of this rich problem and all of the options that they have. So both of you, I think it'd be interesting to talk about, how does somebody get started if they don't have a lot of this infrastructure built? Do they have to do all of this? how either one, maybe both you guys
Well,
answer.
can I just start with a like historical
Yeah.
information, and then the hall maybe can talk a little more. Again, back in the 90s, probably, I think it was, I worked for PepsiCo, and they had this program that they called the Right Side Up Company. And it was basically this idea only, 25 years in advance, where they trained the frontline workers in interpersonal skills, facilitation skills. And they said the people who are like delivering Pepsi to the store, stocking it in the store, on the warehouse floor or something, those are the people who really know what's happening and what the customer wants. And they wanted to like empower that level to start to feed information to make decisions in the company. And it was a brilliant idea that didn't work. And one of the reasons it didn't work is there just wasn't enough infrastructure and support and continuous development for that to be successful. So really, like, the idea is really good, but implementing it actually is pretty hard.
So the message is, don't try to do too much. Focus on something you can scale and implement and iterate on.
Yes.
Yeah.
And now we have technology that can help you do that,
Yeah.
right? Which they didn't have back then.
Actually, and to take a cue from that, don't try to do too much and don't try to do it all by yourself. That's another thing, because there are some things that are possible to outsource. So for example, let's begin with, you cannot coach people on what is good leadership if you haven't articulated that in the context of what is true for your organization. Now, a lot of organizations will have a leadership model that says that, we're a learning culture, we celebrate failure. But think about that in the context of a healthcare company, a fire rescue company. People could die. Like, that just doesn't work. So your leadership model has to reflect the context of your business. And that is not something you can outsource. So you need to do that in-house. And then outsourcing is not necessarily outsourcing. It is bringing an inlet of experts who've got these tried and tested mechanisms and tools and content and several years of experience, and vendor partners like yourself can now make it possible in very scalable and affordable ways. So don't do too much. Don't do too much all by yourself. Start with the basics on crystallizing what is true for your organization, leverage technology where it can amplify your efforts, and then put in mechanisms to create accountability and see if that's really working. And that's part 2.0 that Irresistible Leadership later this year is going to uncover on how you do that.
I want to highlight one part of what you're saying, which is the contextual element. That part about different companies need to have different cultures and different leadership philosophies. That's really a big change in the past. Right. It's been like there's one way to be a good leader. Now it really is very contextual because the environments are so very different. One of the things for Sounding Board, we have a set of leadership capabilities. That's a standard set that if companies have not gone through the process of developing their own, they can use the one that we've developed through a lot of years of research. But that set is also entirely customizable. So if you have done that work, and generally the larger companies have done that work, then you can still use the software to track all of that by setting up your own a number of leadership capabilities that you want to track and measure and coach to.
Yeah, I'd like to just add one more point on that idea of being authentic to yourself, your company. Great companies succeed because of something they do that's unique to them. There's something about their approach, their culture, their model, their focus that their competitors don't do. So if you just go buy a generic leadership program and just turn it on, you've just lost that. So one of the first things you should do as you're building this program is have a philosophical discussion with your senior executives about what are the behaviors and skills and capabilities that we reward around here that have made us successful, that we want other people to understand. And that gives you clarity instead of looking at the 17,000 competencies in some library that you think every leader needs to have.
For sure, for sure. Related to this, I saw a question in there about a 9-box approach to development, which again was developed in like 1980 or something, a long time ago. And I do think there's value to trying to look for potential. I think the big question is, how do you know if someone has potential or not? And generally that has been somewhat stereotypical, subjective, and hasn't really accounted for diversity of culture, background, style. So I don't think it's terrible, but the big question is, how do you measure potential?
Well, I have a little bit more controversial attitude about it. I think we need to get rid of it, to be honest. I think it's a limiting framework. Because in most and I've talked to a lot of companies about this, in most companies, there are dozens and dozens of different directions an individual can go to add more value. And so when you say potential to do what?
Yeah, how do you define it? Yeah.
It's kind of a silly idea. The first time I saw the 9-box grid and I didn't know anything about it, I was like, what does potential mean? And the person said, well, potential to move up 2 levels. Well, that's a self-defining, that's a circular logic. So I don't think you need to I mean, everybody has these things for the very top of the house, but I
Yes,
think
Robert saying everyone has potential. Yes, it's more like identifying what that potential is than it is saying, having a binary decision, does the person have potential or not?
Right. And also a lot of leadership development now is, we talked about it in the text, in the comments, is rotation into new roles, into new projects, into new parts of the company. That is a leadership development process that creates depth, that creates strength, that creates resilience in the organization. It isn't just waiting for somebody to reach that upper corner of the grid before they get promoted.
Right, exactly. Okay, Nehal and Josh, any other questions there that you really want to answer? We have about 5 more minutes.
Power skills. Let's talk a little bit about power skills, you guys. I sort of coined that phrase a few years ago when we started to work with the Greater Good Science Center, and I've read many, many of their things, and it comes up over and over again. Lori, I'm curious, from your perspective, how do you coach a leader who's maybe not very good at listening, maybe we're not very good at paying attention or caring or
So maybe I'll be a little controversial.
You're a coach.
Some of those items on the list, we don't really coach for it. To me, it's not really a coaching job to coach for happiness. It's a life coaching job. It's maybe not a leadership coaching job to coach for happiness. Yeah. But in terms of things like interpersonal skills, our approach is that you have to change the mindset to have lasting change. So why is someone not listening? Well, they're thinking about their behavior in a certain way that is not facilitating listening. So what we do is we help them change their mindset first and then add the behavior or skills to that. And now you have an alignment between their thinking and their behaviors, and that tends to stick over time. Same goes for things like delegation. Like you look at newer managers, like they just have the hardest time delegating. They'll end up doing everything themselves. And if you just try to tell them, here's 5 ways to delegate, it just won't happen unless you help them think differently about why delegation, what's the value to the employee, to the company, to themselves, and then once they get clear on that, they can add the behavior and it will stick.
That's great. And the other thing that came up in the conversation was role modeling. Senior leaders role model these empathy types of skills a lot, and then there's just an enormous amount of impact they have, and they don't always realize that from their behaviors.
100%. The leaders are actually under the spotlight. So whatever they're doing, people start to copy that because look, these are the people who are successful in the organization. So then employees think, oh, I have to be like that to be successful. So it really is on, mid and senior level leaders to be very alert to what it is they're role modeling. It's almost like parents, you might not realize you're accidentally role modeling something to your child. And then when they're 28, like mine is, you figure out, oh, that wasn't really what I wanted to role model to them. Same for leaders. That part of being a leader is increasing your awareness of what your perception you're creating to others.
There's a
Lori,
lot
I
of
think on a
interesting. Go ahead, Nehal, sorry.
Yeah, just a quick plug. I picked on this one little thing that, Lori said, and that's really important. It is about a lot of role modeling, because that sets the tone for what is acceptable or what is right or good, or what does even success
the
look like.
norms, right? Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And most organizations focus this on senior leaders and executives, and that's where it misses impact, because to the point you made on mid-level managers, those are the boots on the ground. Those are the biggest segment of people who come in contact with the biggest segment of people, and a lot of culture and tone is created there, which is why these new age approaches of not keeping it very exclusive for top of the rim, but really bringing it down multiple levels across every level becomes really important.
Oh, 100%. There's actually research that shows that more than 25% of the organization has to be demonstrating that approach for it to become a part of the culture. So for coaching and leader development, you have to have at least 25%.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a tipping point.
And
Thanks.
then it's kind of a snowball effect.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Any last comments?
Well, I would like to say one thing, Laura. You have gotten 295 of the most interesting people I've ever heard about on this chat stream here. So in addition to hopefully you guys all take our survey and help us with this research, I think we need to find a way to invite you guys to another session. So we'll be doing more on this with Sounding Board. We have a program called the Big Reset. For those of you that are interested, reach out to us, where we get together every week and talk about these things. But a lot of you have incredible contributions, and we'll make sure we share that with the rest of you as this wraps up.
I know there's actually amazing questions and comments in the chat. We might want to take that and see if we can respond even to more of those. And
yeah, this has been a really great group. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Lori, for inviting us. Thank you, Nehal.
Oh, you're welcome.
Fantastic.
Thank you for coming, and thank you for everyone who's been here and offering your thoughts and questions and ideas. And thank you, Nehal, for all that amazing data.
Thank you, everyone. This has been a great session.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.